noticed. Subtle, ain't I?
Okay, each of you say something for me. Like just your normal tone of voice.
This is my normal tone of voice.
And I'm about on my normal tone of voice.
After 2 beers.
Yeah.
Okay, that's fine.
Good.
And let's start. So, what's your name?
My name is Kim Ramsey. I'm from,
No, oh, wait.
cut.
It's
Cut.
one,
I
two.
gotta remember what I said.
So you're going.
Name.
Name. You know where you're from, when you were here at the Vagabond, and how you got here. The story of how you got here.
Okay. Well, how I got here is pretty boring as after the word. But anyway, go ahead. Anytime.
You got to get started.
Yeah. He's got to say action.
And
You go first.
I'll go first.
action.
My name is Kim Ramsey. I'm from Southern California. I first came to Europe in the fall of '69 with my sister and her friend. They were over here for 5 weeks. I was over here for 5 weeks with them, and then 5 weeks after that. I had fallen in love with the city of Munich. I was sitting at the Hofbrauhaus one night, figuring out where to go because I'd pretty well done Munich. And I met a young lady who said, "There's this really cool place, man. It's up in the Alps, man. It's got this bitchin' view, and you gotta check it out. There's such lovely people up there." So she scribbled something down, and 24 hours later, I checked in for 2 days, and I left 3 weeks later. And that was the fall of '69. And my mother had just sent me a clipping from the newspaper of telling me the death of Jack Kerouac, who I had read his book 5 years earlier, On the Road, which I highly recommend. And it started the change in my life that is probably still going on. And I hitchhiked from Munich to the Swiss border and didn't want any hassle, so I got on a train and took it all the way to Aigle and then up the Cog and walked into a bar, and there I was. And first person I ever met at Club Vagabond was Brian Travers. And like people say, he was a very balanced individual. He had a chip on each shoulder. And he wasn't really enthralled with Americans either. But he taught me the way. I listened to him. I didn't learn that much. But I'm 19 years old, standing at a bar, not allowed to drink in the United States, not allowed to vote in the United States. But I could be drafted and sent away. I certainly wasn't a draft dodger. I just avoided it. And decided that all these people talking about picking grapes and working on ski lifts were a lot more interesting than going back to Southern California. I did go back because I had a return ticket. And then I came back again, and here's Peter Craig.
Well, yeah. My name is Peter Craig, and I'm a resident of Australia, living on the south coast of New South Wales, but a citizen of New Zealand, where I lived most of my life. In 1970, an old mate of mine, unfortunately called Black Pete, and I left New Zealand and went to Africa, and then from Africa we flew up to England, and we worked picking hops and apples in Kent in England, with the idea that we're going to stick around, play a bit of rugby, as all Kiwi boys do. And we met another guy called Brian Farrell. He said, "Hey mate, you got to go to Lausanne. It's far better than staying in this shithole, spending the winter in England." So we bought a van for £30 between the three of us, and did out so we could all sleep in the back, and drove it out here to Lausanne. Drove up the mountain, and
You never saw the van again, did you?
That's another story, mate. Oh. But arrived at Fougere, and the first person I met was Brian Travers. Now there's a coincidence. And then we walked up to the Vagabond because we had to check in, and this massive water fight was going on. Every floor of the Vagabond was just pouring water, and the hoses were going, there were buckets going. There were about 10 handymen all fighting. Jesus, this is going to be all right. And that night I had an Elvis Presley haircut at the time too, and that night I got incredibly drunk, and a few days later got a temporary job here at Profunda, where we're sitting right now, and then got a job there for the winter. And I stayed for just over 3 years, and then 5 years later came back after Carol and Alan had got rid of the place to Dave and Joanne, I came back and I worked for Dave and Joanne here for another 2 years. Worked the bar, and then I was the vag cook for over a year. And that's a brief history of how I got to Lausanne and what Lausanne's done for me.
So, you're here at this reunion, and there are a lot of you. What, almost 200 people?
Is it? I didn't know.
Yeah.
I lost count.
And I know the smoke bothers him, but it does. It's his smoke because it's coming from an unknown source. Yeah, I know. I'm just saying.
I understand.
If it's from a source that you can see, it's okay. Anyhow,
That's all right,
so
I'll put
you're
it
here. 200 people are here. It's a 5-day event. People have come from all over the world to be here. So obviously there's something going on. What's the deal? Why? What's the deal? Why is everybody here?
Well,
For 40 years later.
to simplify it for myself, I was born and raised in Southern California, went to school, grammar school, high school, and of all the people I grew up with and met and everything, this many years late, I graduated from high school in 1968, and I have contact with 2 people that I grew up with and went to school with and things like that. I probably have contact with 80 people I met on the road, and most of them here, and that's why I'm here. That's why I'm back.
The friendships, the experiences.
Yeah. I mean, everybody will say the same thing. Hadn't seen the guy in ages. He drifted through California once or twice, and I've seen him since then. But you sit down and you pick up where you left off. It's as simple as that. There's absolutely no pretensions of anything. It's just you pick up where you left off. And I don't know anybody else on the planet other than immediate family that you can do that with. Me personally, and I'm sure other people have the same type of relationships. But I was just fascinated to meet people that did and didn't speak English, and just had the same frame of mind, and it was all at the same time. My favorite story about speaking English is when him and Black Pete, known to his intimate friends as Total Darkness, stood at the bar, these 2 guys from New Zealand, and they were following the All Blacks. That's why they were traveling around where they were. And they stood at the bar, and I was bartender, and I watched them for 3 days. And I didn't understand a word they said because they were speaking Kiwi and they were talking about rugby. And there was 2 things I'd never heard of in my life. And then you picked up some English, and I picked up some Kiwi.
We educated you.
Yeah, well, that's one way of putting it. And just things like that. His best mate, Black Pete, had a way with people. It's not that if you weren't from New Zealand, he didn't like you, or if you weren't from South Island, he didn't like you. If you weren't from Tikawiti, South Island, he didn't like you. He was like, and he mellowed.
Not much.
No, but he mellowed. They used to have a movie in English once a week down in the lower village, and a lot of us didn't speak French, so we'd get the first person in line that spoke French, and they'd say, "1, please," in French, and send her one. And then we'd go and slide our money and say, "Même chose," okay, "Même chose," okay. Black Pete would get up to the window and she'd say in French, "How many?" And he'd say, "Speak white, you mug." Am I wrong? Or am I softening it a bit?
No,
He was a beaut.
Yeah.
And it's just people like that, with
Yeah.
real people. He's a beautiful guy.
Well, he was we grew up together with
Yeah.
kids.
It was Pete and Repeat.
Yeah. Well, they call me Repeat because I used to throw up a lot. I was
Only every night.
I was a good person. I used to throw up a fair bit. So he was Black Pete and I was Repeat. Yeah. And but with Luke now.
One of the owners, Luke Vanderkamp.
You must have heard about Luke and talked about Luke. Luke had this thing with me, and he would say, "Not," he had this mellifluous voice, "Not," and I'd say on the front steps, "Not in the bar, not in reception, and not in front of the nuns,
Nunnery next door. What's your
I
places
came
he'd already done?
Came back 5 years later, walked into the bar, and I was pissed when I got in here. We'd been drinking all the way down from Germany when we come through. Walked into the bar, and Luke's standing there. He looks up and he says, "Not."
We called them Pete's Pizzas. One winter he lost one at the back end of the building, and it was there all winter. It was frozen.
And it had all the requisite
Yeah.
tomato skins and sweet corn.
A little bit of cut up
Carrot
spaghetti.
and all that.
Pete was here.
Yeah.
One time, one of the bartenders. Are we off the subject here? Or?
No.
One time I was chatting with a bartender named Tony Ty, an Australian, and we became good buds. And I was just talking about back where I came from in Southern California. The high schools would put on a yearly carnival, and you'd have all these little fish bowls full of fish. And I would throw you buy for 25 cents, you buy a ping pong ball, throw it in, you win a goldfish. And so we were just so outrageous back then. We'd win a goldfish and we'd scoop it out and swallow it.
That would have made me throw up again.
Yeah. So Tony said, "No, you never did that." I said, "Well, yeah, I did that." No, you never did that. I said, "Well, okay, I did." And you say I didn't. Fine. And I dropped the subject. A week later, I come to the bar. He's got this big shit-eating grin on his face, and I ordered a drink. And he's got a liter mug full of water. Thunk, and there's a goldfish in it.
Four. We went down.
Oh, you
and
did
bought
get
'em.
four.
We
They
got
went
four.
down the
We could
back. I mean,
afford
it was a
four, yeah.
mission from God. These guys got me with 4 goldfish. And the whole bar going, see, he's called your bluff. So I grabbed one and swallowed it. Oh, my God. And Luke heard about it, and he came in the next night, and he said, 2 rules. 1, there will never be another goldfish at the Club Vagabond. And 2, if there is, and someone eats it, you're banned for life. Not the person that ate it, I'm banned for life. So I was nervous about goldfish for a couple of weeks, then I didn't care. But there's little quiet little things like that would happen. Let's see, what else? I'm at a brief loss here, which is rare.
Yeah, so
But
nice.
Tony Ty died on Everest.
Tony
Yeah.
died on Everest, yeah.
That's why Chris Bonington and I don't get along. In an Everest expedition, the Nepalese government gives you permits for the people climbing the mountain, and some of those permits are only for certain elevations. And Tony was base camp, 17,600 or something. Well, the climb had to be aborted. It didn't succeed. And Tony asked, he had to have gone through Bonington, and he said, I'll go up to Camp 1 and help evacuate material. And Camp 1, you probably know, is between base camp and Camp 1 is the glacier. It's probably, other than the weather, the biggest killer there. And Tony got hit by a piece of ice the size of this building in 72,
72, mate,
72, yeah.
Were you here in 72?
Yeah.
We were having a party down at Horizon,
Yeah.
the next restaurant down, which was going pretty good at the time.
Oh, yeah.
A lot of us, and I actually heard on the radio.
Yeah.
Just came over, we had a radio on that spouted out some English that a climber had been killed on Everest. And
Everybody
then,
thought of Haston.
Yeah, obviously. And then the name came over, Tony Ty. And shit, it was...
It was a black night.
Oh, yeah. We tried to keep everyone's spirits up and keep partying and drinking and all that sort of thing, but... yeah.
They found his body three years ago.
Yeah, something
Identified it a year ago.
Yeah.
His girlfriend at the time, Jilly Valentine, is here.
She's here?
Oh,
Yeah.
a beauty.
Yeah.
She's the only person that's this tall. She said it's the only time she's ever stuck out in a crowd. And but anyway, that was that. That was
Yeah.
Tony and I. He didn't. We both wanted jobs on the climb. And I
You
used
didn't make it?
No. I there's so many stories going through my head. I don't know where to go with which, but and I'm not talking about myself, but I usually talk about the ones I was there. When Haston was getting in shape for the climb, I used to crash at their place because I knew how to unknot ropes and I slept on them and things like that. And every morning he'd drag me up the mountain and we'd climb the chimney. Must have done it a dozen times. And near the end, last time, I said, "How many chimneys are there on Everest?" And he said, "None." So he was getting his ass in shape. And so Tony, with me, and we were talking, and Tony said, "You think I could get a job on the climb?" And Dougal said, "I don't know. Write a letter to Chris Bonington, both you guys." So Tony wrote one, I didn't. And Tony brought the letter introducing himself and with a little bit of experience. And he brought the letter to Dougal and said, "I wonder if you'd just kind of endorse it and give me a little perk here." So he wrote on the letter, "Give the Aussie bastard a job." And he got it. And that was that. There's some side stories, but more insignificant. So he took, I had already gone east, and I was planning to go up there, and he said he was looking for me on the way, and he never found me because I came back west. But that was that. But yeah, the night that I think you might have come in and told us.
Yeah,
yeah.
we're trying to sing.
I was
all that
behind the
sort of
bar, and I lasted about a half hour. And,
Yeah.
and Chris Fish, Mr. Agro,
Yeah.
he came in behind the bar and said, "Get the hell out of here! You're not tending bar."
Yeah.
So it was. So we had a couple of pints.
So did you work here for the 3 years?
Here,
No. The
Vagabond?
VAG. Yeah, the
I worked
VAG.
here more like 2.5 years.
Yeah,
I worked
yeah.
at the Bernouse 1 year. I worked at the Vagabond in the front end and the Vagabond at the back
Yeah.
end. Yeah.
My first job at the VAG was I was the doorman. It was a private club in those days.
Couldn't let the American college kids in.
And the Turks and the Greeks
And-
and all that sort of
that's
stuff.
right.
Couldn't let them in, but
Strip
so
a
I had to
Turk-
sit up at
strip a Turk
reception all
naked.
night and
We'd run them drinks, right?
well, and drugs. And I'd get halfway through the
Recre-
night.
recreational drugs,
yeah,
yes.
and someone would drag me out and we'd have a joint and a herd of elephants could have walked into the place after that. I wouldn't have had a clue. And
I remember that. Yeah, the bouncer.
yeah, bouncer, and I have not had a fight in my life. Sort of anyone who was misplaced
Well, he was.
in a job, it was that. And but I didn't get fired, although I was, towards the end of the season I was having trouble turning up to work because it was pretty boring sitting up there and everyone's having a party downstairs. So, but I was helped out during the course of the evening. Yeah.
I think it's at certain points, Alan made it up as he was going along. You know what I mean?
Well, the good thing about Alan, he just wanted to give everyone a job.
Yeah.
He just wanted to see you employed. Like you'd come to the Vagabond at any time,
Yeah.
and there'd be 15 handymen all sort of walking around doing nothing.
Drinking tea.
Yeah. And I got a job. I'd sort of not under a cloud. I didn't really leave under a cloud when I left that job, but it wasn't sort of a happy thing, and I was a bit aggro because of, I think you get like that.
Life.
And I was going to go to Australia, but I thought I'd come back here for a couple of weeks and just hang out and say goodbye to a few people and what have you. And they were building the disco downstairs. So Alan gave me a job. And just sanding all the beams, and Clark, he was there. So, and I ended up staying for another winter. I didn't quite make Australia, then stayed for another winter and worked at Horizon down there with
Hollow.
this Italian guy, Paolo, who was another legend of Blazan. An Italian guy that was a beautiful guy, generous to a fault,
Oh.
could not make a dollar. Never, we used to call it the restaurant at the end of the world.
Yeah.
And again, going back to what we used to do out there.
I'd wake up with 3 tablecloths on top of me.
Yeah. And I lived in 1771. I don't know if you've seen 1771 out there, a little
It's
chalet
an
out
itty bitty
there.
little box.
It's,
Oh, you gotta go out there.
Oh, it's beautiful.
It's
got
beautiful now.
one room
Someone's
up.
living in it.
Yeah, no, one room up, one room down. Had no heating, no nothing.
It was the typical, the
Yeah.
cows at the bottom and the
Yeah.
people at the top and keep
And
it.
I'd-
We're 1771.
I'd get up
Wow.
in the morning and my jeans would be frozen solid. You'd have to bang them and put them on, and then we'd get out and go to work. And although sometimes I'd never make it up there. But
Yeah, it
this Joe Perry reckoned he saved my life. Like Joe's a bit strange. He reckoned he saved my life one day. He walked out to Horizon, and he said he passed 1770 and my legs were sticking out the door. So he said, "Oh, he's in trouble." So he went and had a few beers. He came back, and my legs had disappeared. So he thought he's okay. So he walked off.
Joe
But,
Perry,
yeah.
the world's oldest teenager. I don't know if you've heard of him, but he was the world's oldest teenager.
Yeah.
We had a party, New Year's Eve, 1971, at Paulo's, and then we all went by and filtered through. I mean, the place was 10-foot square. It was a little peasant barn when it was built. And we had myself and 3 or 4 other people that I cannot remember who they were decided to spend the night in 1771. We thought that would be so cool, man. And we brought our gear with us.
Not
And
cool, cold.
Well, so we went up there, I remember, and we stomped up snow off our boots and crawled in our sleeping bags, all your clothes on. And I remember waking up and my head on the side of the floor, and all I saw, with one eye, I saw my boots, and there was still snow around.
Oh, yeah.
And I thought, it's going to be cold when I get out of
There's
this
a big
bag.
pile of ice inside.
Oh, yeah.
Because you used to thump it in and stay there all winter. Just a big
It
pile
was
of
there.
bloody ice. And
Apparently now they
door.
ruined it. They got heat in
Heated,
there now.
yeah.
What the hell.
Could you talk about, what kind of normal day was for you? What was the kind of tempo of your life?
But look at me.
Yes.
Yeah, look at me.
A lot of it for me was trying to get well by 5 o'clock so I could have a beer.
Yeah, that sounds familiar.
Yeah.
I
Look,
used,
we had so many different jobs, I suppose. Like sometimes I worked nights, sometimes I worked days.
we'd get breakfast,
Yeah.
and we'd get lunch, which was leftover last night's dinner, and then we'd get dinner. We got 3 squares a day.
Because you're looking at two non-skiers.
Oh yeah,
We didn't ski.
no, made absolutely no sense whatsoever.
You're like, why are we here?
The one ski race I
We
was in,
didn't
I got a bottle of wine for the most spectacular finish because I fell about 20 meters from the finish line and literally tumbled over it.
I won a slalom. I don't
That's
know
right.
how, but I retired from competitive skiing.
Yeah, on top.
But people used to have to carry me down.
Yeah.
I gave it
remained,
up. I said, no.
I remained
Cold.
employed quite often because I was willing to work during the day,
Yeah.
and everybody else wanted to work at night and ski all day. So I got that figured out real quick. And Alan liked it because I wasn't behind the bar at night, but I was on the other side of the bar. So that was fun. But a typical day, yeah, you'd wake up a little rough around the edges, and you'd do whatever it took to straighten out. And I will admit there was one point in the dead of winter, probably 2 months, maybe 3, where I probably never left the building. There was absolutely no reason to. But I could always tell when it was a full moon because the quiet people got loud and the loud people got quiet and the people that did didn't and the people that didn't did, and it was you could always tell when it was full moon. I remember that part. When I was a handyman, it was get up in the morning and have some tea and go look at what you're going to do and have some tea. And I remember we were down in Fougere one day, and there was 4 of us, Brian Travers and myself and a couple other people, standing in the kitchen of Fougere's having tea at about 10 in the morning. And Dougal and Annie lived below Fougere at the time, and she was coming the back way down home, and she walked by the window in the kitchen, and she all saw 4 of us standing there drinking tea, and she's yelling, "Den of thieves! Den of thieves!" Go, hey, Annie, call it as you see it.
Well, my first winter I worked here, worked in this place.
For a year or for a season?
For a season, first winter season. And I'd start in the morning. I lived down just below the Vag, and I'd have to pick up 20 litres of milk and stick them on my back and 4 litres of cream and walk past the Chamois, a big building down there
Wow.
that housed Belgians, and this putrid smell used to come out of the kitchen, out of the blowers, and I had to walk past it. I had noticed the milk was there.
Yeah, the deliveries were at Fougere because there was no road to the lorries on.
And because of that, I'd be chucking up again the whole way up the bloody hill up to Providence in
Sick
the
as a
morning
dog.
until-
Thank you.
You're welcome.
So, and then you'd try and get well again and get through the day
But-
here and get down to Vag at night and power and do it again.
Paula was a saint. I was shacked up there
Thanks.
in a few evenings for quite a period of time with a young lady I knew, and every morning, no problem. We'd go up there and knock back a couple of espressos, and Paula would be puttering around, and he'd putter around, and then what would we call them? The real customers would come, and it was my time to go to work, and I would walk to work and visit my bedroom that I had at the Vagabond, and clean up the bar, and drinking didn't start till 10-ish, if it wasn't left over from the night before, 10 in the morning. Yeah,
Well, why don't you answer,
you know,
John?
a very
Why
big,
don't you answer when he talked about the climbers?
Pete knows a very big part of who Dougal was. But you only knew him at the bar.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I'll do my
Yeah.
Dougal Haston impression later on.
Yeah. I'd heard about Dougal before I came because the guy that I came with talked about him because of his exploits around the bar at the Vag and clambering around the walls without touching the floor and things
Yeah.
like that. And
That's right.
and then he would turn up, and the guy used to get. I'd see him only when he got really pissed. And I was working behind the bar one time, and he came in, and he's pretty quiet and pretty morose, and started knocking the beers back big time. And I said, "You're right, Dougal." And he said, "Yeah." And he just said, "I had a wee tumble," and apparently he'd done a backflip, caught the rope on the way back. And there's people that know the story a lot better than me, but apparently it's true. Hanging over 400 feet or something like that. So he used to come to Polo's up when I worked up there, and Polo would cook these magnificent meals for us, or for him.
Yeah.
And
You give me
and
10
Annie.
francs. Give me 10
Give me
francs.
10 francs.
Cost him 40 to make it.
Yeah. And Dougal would just write himself off. But he was always good fun. You know, he didn't say a lot. He just muttered, and then he would just go quiet as, and then you'd see him crawling or tottering off. You know, but I didn't get into that climbing world, mate. That scared me. But Kim got into it.
A little bit. Well, you knew when Dougal had gone over the edge, you'd buy a pack of cigarettes. And you know, okay, he didn't smoke, but when he'd been drinking and give us a pack of Winstons, you go, okay, well, we're on the downhill side now. And I never heard of him. I heard of his name. I heard his name while I was at the bar, and it was let's see, be the spring of '70 roughly when they had come back from Annapurna. Ian Clough had been killed, and he came back and Dougal's back, and okay, good for him. And I was standing at the bar, a 19-year-old from Southern California with a big mouth. I've changed. I'm not 19 anymore. And standing next to this big lanky coon. And, hey, hi, I'm Kim. Hi, I'm Dougal. Okay, fine. I said, so what do you do for a living? He said, I'm a mountain climber. And I went, oh, I don't know nothing about mountain climbing. The only thing I ever saw was ABC Wild Wilderness Sports filmed an asshole crawling up the Old Man of Hoy in Scotland. And he said, yeah, that was me. Friends from then on. He bought me my first Drambuie. And I will curse him for that.
And we did drink a lot of Drambuie together. Yeah.
I should have bought stock. But he liked the wee dram, and he bought me my first Drambuie, and it hit the bar. And I took this thing and went, "Ooh, this is pretty tasty stuff." And Dougal took it, knocked it back, put the last drop in his beer. He said, "That's how you drink Drambuie." And that's how I drank it for the next 5-6 years.
It was a fact at that time that the Vagabond sold more Drambuie than any other bar in Europe.
And Dougal drank half of it. But I met him as on the customer end of the bar, because I was a handyman at the time. I wasn't a bartender, and then I became a bartender. That's where I learned the trick that when the cigarettes went across the bar, there was absolutely no reason to have any type of conversation with Dougal, even though you'd never really had a lot of conversation with Dougal. And I can do real quick, if I could just stand up for a second and do my late evening Dougal Haston impersonation. Thank you. 3 syllables. Come on.
Okay.
And
you're American.
This will be. I went to American high school in the States, and this I'm going to go off camera just for a second, because you have to do this to do the Dougal Haston thing. And you'd be working the bar, and you'd set a beer in front of Dougal, and you'd turn around to serve other people, and he'd be gone. Absolutely gone. Wasn't there. There's a hole where he used to be, but he wasn't there. And then, if you stood there for a minute, you'd see this. So that's my Dougal Haston impersonation. One night he was under the influence of alcohol, and Annie and I were taking him home. And she was on one side of him, and I was on the other side of him, and we were going down the hill. And he started to fall. And Annie just jumped away, and I hung on to him, trying to keep him up. And he fell on me and broke 3 ribs. And he's laying there, and I'm laying there, and she just came over to me and said, "You idiot, you should have let go of him. Help me get him up." That's because she said every time she brought him home, if you started to yell timber, she'd just drop him. So I was walking around for about 3 weeks. I couldn't smile without hurting. And he convinced me it was my fault. Dougal had a philosophy. I asked him once. Dougal was very philosophical. He liked philosophy. He was really into metaphysics. I figured that with a climber. And I said, well, how do you feel when someone? This is after Tony was killed. And I said, well, what went through your mind when he was killed? And he said he made a mistake. It's his fault he got killed. I said, what do you mean it's his fault? He said, well, if he wasn't standing where he was when it happened, he wouldn't have got killed. I said, well, what about so-and-so or so-and-so that got killed climbing? He said, the person made a mistake, and that was the attitude. And it helped kind of tweak my attitude toward mortality and life and death and things like that. And he was pretty cut and dry on the situation. If you could interview him 20 minutes after he was killed, he would have said, I made a mistake. That was his attitude. I used to crash at the Hastings quite a bit. Like I mentioned a little earlier, I would untangle all his ropes and things like that, fall asleep on the ropes, because when you're in your cups, anything's comfortable. I'd make him breakfast, and not when he was getting in shape in '72, we'd go climbing quite often.
Good.
The attention.
He's been written about in a deified fashion.
So I only know Mick and I like that one about Mickey passing away. That's one of my. I tell that to people that don't even know what climbing is, and they don't know where China is.
Well, let's tell the story. So
Yeah.
Anyway, so it started Dougal. Dougal died just like you briefly know how he died. Why don't we do that? His funeral. Start with Mick Burke.
I don't know much about it. So
Okay,
go ahead.
start with
We
Mick Burke.
weren't here at the time.
Yeah.
We
Take
weren't
a Mick
around.
Burke.
Seacom was
Yeah.
looking for his body.
Yeah, but he's dead.
Oh yeah.
I'd like to hear more about him. He's a legend.
Yeah.
Pete.
Well, no, I can.
Yeah.
Black Pete's a legend.
Yeah,
That's
what
great.
I've been told that, know, within your community.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
So,
Oh shoot. Oh God. Well, you've got him from the day you were born. I spent time with him here, and then
so that would make
so. How'd you hear about Dougal dying?
Can't remember. I don't remember. I don't even know where I was living at the time.
It was winter of '77. I was winter hiking and camping with a guy in eastern Canada, in a place called the Eastern Townships, north of the Vermont border, and we were setting up a cross-country ski trail. We were tying nylon straps along an old ski-doo path, and we spent a couple nights out in the dead of winter. Of course, it was the heaviest snowfall in history, and this much of the tent was sticking out. But when we got back 2 days later, someone, I think Rob told me immediately that Dougal'd been killed in an avalanche, and that's as much as I knew at that point in time. Black Pete was on the crew that were poking the snow and trying to find his body. I found out about that, and as a matter of fact, the guy that I was setting up this thing with, after I took in the information and didn't get weepy or anything like that, he said, well, how do you feel about the death of Dougal Haston? And I said, he must have made a mistake. That's what happened there. He got back from I don't know exactly the time frame. Obviously, Mickey had gone missing 27,000 feet, if I'm not mistaken, after spending quite a bit of time sitting in a tent with Dougal. Dougal was reading Lord of the Rings. I think this is in an autobiography, but he was reading Lord of the Rings. I think this was this climb. And, the book's this frickin' thick. And they sat in the tent for, 23 days or something, waiting for a storm to go by. And 15 days into it, they had a conversation, which was, what are you reading? And Dougal threw the book to him, to Mickey. And Mickey opened it up, read about a half a page, threw it back to Dougal and said, this guy's head's full of fucking fairies. That was that. Later on, I had asked Dougal, gee, what really happened to Mickey? You were climbing, the weather came, the weather went, and he said, well, Mickey went out to take some photographs. And I said, well, what happened? He said, well, he defected to the Chinese side. And that was the end of that conversation. He obviously made a mistake. Mickey was a little guy climbing with a big guy. He was just a presence. He was a great guy. We stayed with myself and a few friends crashed at his place in London on our way back to North America once, and we went to an Indian restaurant. There must have been 10 of us, and we were ordering wine, and Mickey told the waiter not to run out of what we were drinking, so the guy took the case of wine and put it near us and kept a track on the bottles. We were ordering food, and we were talking food, and Mick was talking Indian food to this guy, and he said, "Well, does your cook know how to cook this?" And he said, "Oh yes, he does." And Mick said, "Well, is he a good cook?" And he said, "Actually, he's from Nepal." Mickey jumped up, ran in the kitchen. Half hour later, there was food hitting the table that no one had ever heard of. It was the greatest meal I ever had in my life. It was really good. Mickey and I said, "How'd you order this?" And Mickey's response was in Nepalese, that kind of thing. He was just a hoot. Had a great time with Mick. Comes out in Tehachapi, I wear shorts, and when it goes away in November, I put long pants on.
And I'm just coming off winter.
Yeah, he's coming off winter, so. And my cigar's out, okay? When it's
you.
definitely out, I'll just stick it in my mouth because I love sucking back the good stuff.
Can you stick that in? I can't believe you.
Stick it in your what? Oh.
I can't believe you'd stick that in your mouth.
My old man used to say, "What'd you do, get that off the front lawn?"
So the Vagabond was known for a pretty wild place in the early 70s, late 60s, early 70s. Is there any truth to the rumor?
Oh, it was fact.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. Oh, free love, right? I mean, it wasn't a fornicatorium, but it was
Pretty good.
casual. But I think Pete will back me up on this. There was the occasion where Dougal was chatting to a young lady on one end of the bar, and Annie was chatting to a young man on the other end of the bar, if I'm not mistaken. It happened. They had a open marriage. Not necessarily, I don't think they necessarily agreed with each other on that point, but you throw alcohol into any picture, and you're going to muddy the waters. As far as the sex is concerned, I know absolutely nothing about anybody else's sex life, and I, being the type of person I was at the time, didn't have much of one. Yeah, it was there. It was there. There was people meeting people that were never going to see each other again. The big giggle was, if you can't get a woman, get a Canadian nurse. Hey, and a few of them went through, and the Dutch tours. They were one of your favorites.
I'm a happily married man.
Well, so am I.
But yeah, it pretty much was sex, drugs, and rock and roll in the early 70s and in the late. Well, when I came back, I was married. So, but it was still going on. You could see people chatting up people at the bar. Even one night, and this was in '78 or something like that, '79. I was standing with my wife at the bar, and Annie had a hand on my ass. Catherine standing next to me. She wasn't impressed. Not that Annie, I don't know about Annie, but sure shit, Catherine wasn't.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. But early 70s, yeah. As Kim said, I got some, but I didn't get as much as. But some people were much better at it than others.
That's true.
There were the noted guys there.
Oh my gosh. Who will remain nameless?
Probably it would have to remain nameless. One of them was called Clarky.
Shut up. He drove me up here with his wife.
Please cut that out.
Yeah.
Shit, this guy
One
was
was
so
named
good.
Beep.
He was so good. And Clarky had all the moves. And no, this guy had all the moves. He would just approach a girl at the bar and just say, "Like a quick fuck? A slow one? Anything at all?" He was.
So I guess a blowjob's out of the question.
He just dropped all his clothes one night, just stood at the bar. And Luke walked in. Jeez, I'm blown over. Yeah, this guy was amazing, quite amazing.
His modus operandi was if three girls walked in the room, he'd
One of the-
zero in on the ugliest.
Yeah.
Yeah, laid every night.
Yeah. And he would flop his old fella out too and say, "Look at this, there's no skin on the fucking thing."
Yeah, this ain't happening.
Yeah,
He's
so-
going to edit the hell out of this.
Cut the names out if you
Yeah, please do.
Yeah.
No, but
But as I say, some guys were better than others, and I was not as good as most of them.
not as good as most. So join the club. I'll tell you what it was really, and it was
But
kind of
every now and then you got lucky.
yeah, but it was unspoken. Not only the women, the men. They could have been straight-laced little high school graduates that mom and dad sent them to Europe for 3 weeks or something. they're going to go and have some fun and go back home, and you know what happens in, and there was a lot of that, just recreational sex.
Along with recreational drugs.
Drugs.
Yeah, plenty of that. Places. In fact, the first 3 years, you know, the 70 to 73, it was all guys coming back from the east, from Pakistan, Afghanistan, bringing all this beautiful bloody hashish back. And I remember I'd smoked a little bit of grass before, but I'd never smoked hashish, nothing like this stuff.
And it was there.
We
there
were
wasn't a market in it, but it was there.
We were up in the room, and we all rolled these, all got this pipe out or whatever, I can't remember.
Chill 'em.
We got to chill 'em out, passing it round, and this stuff hit me like I was hit like a ton of bricks. And I turned around, grabbed hold of Kim, and said, "Hang on, mates, we're going down."
And everybody in the room's just going,
I left the room, I had to walk around, and then I ran him old Black Pete. He was down in the bar, and he was as straight as an arrow
at that time.
At that time. We hadn't been here too long. And he was just bloody disgusted with me. He said, "You've gone off the rails, you're a useless prick." And I'm, whoa, Jesus, I don't know where I am and what's going on. But in those days, yeah, hash, when I came back in 78, the place was full of grass, full of marijuana, and probably 79, 80 was the best bloody dope I've ever smoked in my life, and we just had so much of it, and even my wife smoked it, and she never smoked since.
I got wife married your sister, yeah.
Yeah.
There was a little Rhodesian guy, back then Rhodesia existed, and they were definitely a unique group of individuals.
They weren't allowed to travel anywhere.
Yeah, they could go to 5 countries, Portugal, Switzerland, Greece, South Africa, and I forget the other one. And
where they lived.
And they had to fly. They couldn't travel through. They had to fly to those countries. So very sequestered place. So they were very unaware of a lot of stuff going on. And there was a little guy, great little guy, named Robbie Cook, and he worked for a farmer down in the valley, dairy farmer, and he'd come up on the weekends, and he stood at the bar and drank, and he would always buy a carton of Lucky Strike cigarettes, American cigarettes, because the tobacco was toasted. Well, whatever. We were walking to Lorison one night, to Paulo's, and there's a bench just that you can sit on and rest on the way, and then we'd roll a joint, Marahuchi, and we'd have a joint. He'd never smoked any. And so we said, "Come on, Robbie, you want a toke?" We weren't forced. Yeah, I have a few puffs on that stuff, and he smoked it. And on the way to, and then you get up and keep walking. And on the way, you walk through a stand of trees. And it was a starry night, and it was clear and all that stuff. And we're walking, and Robbie's saying, "This stuff doesn't work. I don't know what the hell you people are talking about. This is a bunch of bullshit." And we come out of the trees, and he looked up and said, "Look at the fucking stars." I said, "Yeah, it works." So that was that. The experiences. One winter I was at the VAG, my last winter, so that'd be 72, 73, and I had my partner there, Ron, whose last name will remain his initials are Ron Stewart. He had a chunk of hash the size of a softball. In American baseball, there's also a sport called softball, and it's a big ball like this. He had a chunk of black Mazi Sharif this big, and at the end of the winter, he had a piece about the size of a golf ball, and we gave it away. We were sick of this stuff, but we consumed it. Let's put it that way. I haven't had a toke in decades. I could care less. But, it's all an individual thing. It's not a biggie.
Towards the end, I think come 79, 80, coke started to appear in the place. Yeah, there was a bit of coke around. There was a guy came through, Stan the man from Boston, Massachusetts, and he just bought a bag of coke with him. Got it through customs. They said, "What's that, sir?" He said, "Washing powder. Thank you very much. See you later." Came up to the VAG. He was this guy was him and his mate. They were criminals. They were stealing cars and doing all sorts of stuff here, and he laid coke all over the place. And then he said he had to go back to Boston. He said Christmas is coming up. This is just before the season started. He said I get the Christmas rush the same as any retailer. And he said the good thing about my job is you get no returns. Everyone's happy. And then that's about the time I left the Vag. I don't know what happened after that in the 80s, but I'm sure that Coke made its appearance for a while. And we used to get to, in the late 70s, a lot of the Swiss coming up to the Vag late at night, and they were smackheads. They were bloody awful. They'd lay around the disco and shit like that. And that was reasonably unpleasant because they were just totally out of it. Yeah.
It was a whole different buzz.
Yeah.
When I was first here in '69, I remember the local policeman, Officer Funt, Mr. Funt, and he was the cop. And he walked into the bar about 5:30 in the afternoon, and he had another policeman with him, and he had a little Swiss guy with him. And they stood there and they talked to each other in the corner, and this little Swiss guy pointed his finger at two people, and
he was the chimney sweep. He was.
That's
he was
right.
The chimney
he was
sweep.
the,
Yeah.
That's right. Forgot that.
Yeah.
And they went and got Luke, one of the owners, Luke Vandekai, and they whispered to him for a little while, a couple minutes, and the other cop took these two guys by the arm and issued them out of the bar. And a few hours earlier, one of the locals, maybe the chimney sweep, saw two people that obviously frequented the Vagabond sharing a cigarette in a vacant field next to the chalet. And this is in '69, and there was some suspicion it might have been illicit drugs. And they came and arrested the guys and took them away. So that's what was happening in the late '60s, early '70s. And then it digressed or progressed to...
It was at about 78, 79, down the disco bar. It was a big night down there, and the local postman came up to me, and he was pissed out of his mind. And he said, "Peter, I'm a drug trafficker." I said, "Fine, come on now, behave yourself." He said, "Yes, I take drugs from the post office to the Vagabond."
Yeah, so it was getting a reputation.
Yeah.
American school kids weren't allowed in, hence the bouncer.
Yeah.
Probably for a number of reasons.
And this is later, and that
yeah, this was after the bouncer.
They started to go against the nuns next door, and that's talk about that later if you like. That's when froth reared its head. You've heard of froth.
Have you heard of froth?
I have, but one of you invented the name, right?
I was part of the.
He was one of four.
Group
There's
that
four
did invent the
syllables.
name, yeah.
He's probably one of the syllables.
The Free Republic of Fede, yeah.
Explain what Fede is.
Well, Fede is where
The Upper Village.
the Upper Village.
Is this thing in your way?
And you want to talk about that now? Or?
Yeah, let's turn it off for a minute.